What is the good you want to see in the world? And what part do you want to play in that? And those two things are not necessarily related. And so, if you have a dream, make sure you understand what role you want to play in that dream.
Welcome to the Let Me Save You 25 Years podcast. I am Shawn David Nelson, that love sack guy. People know me like that. I'm so grateful that you listen to this. I'm so grateful if you would share it. I bring the most talented people on earth to you every week because I just love learning from them. And I hope that this format and the way that we, shape this podcast around a Shawnism, we dive in around a specific topic, we get right to it as opposed to just telling stories. It's useful, not just selfishly to me, but to you. So please share it out. Please give it a 5-star review rating on whatever platform you're hearing me on, seeing me on, YouTube, Apple Pods. It's Spotify. It's so helpful. That's all we got. Any ads you hear are just ads for this platform that I'm on. I'm not seeking any money from this. So I really appreciate your support. If you caught last week, I apologize. I know it was graphic. It was mashed up fingers, chopped off limbs, Baja, dirt bike racing. If you didn't tune in for that one, it's a good story. It's all true. It's wild. Definitely go back an episode, check that out. I break down my entire Baja adventure with my buddies who were a part of it. One of them, losing a finger in the race in a graphic way. But anyway, on with this week. I think you're going to love this episode. We have an amazing Shawnism. Look, the other day, I just got back from Australia. I got to take my daughter. I told her I'd take her anywhere in the world her senior year. She chose Australia. I got to take her to Australia. And I would have loved her to kind of plan the trip, but man, she was just slammed with school and all her activities before. So I had to take on the role of kind of building out our itinerary. And I knew that look, this 17-year-old girl is going to be stuck with her dad in a hotel room on a road trip in a foreign country for 10 days. I knew it was going to be a little bit stressful, at least for her. I was looking forward to a time in my life. But as we're riding to the airport to go catch a 16-hour journey over the ocean, I was breaking down for her, hey, look, here's what's going to happen. We're going to be on this plane. It's a long ride. She'd never been on a ride that long. I was trying to paint the picture for her, right? I was trying to paint the picture of landing in Australia. We're going to land. You're going to feel like garbage. When we land, we're going to have to wait a long time to get the bags, go through customs, get to the hotel. When we check in, we won't even be able to check in like normal because we're going to land at 5 a.m. So, but we can't sleep. If we go to sleep right now, you're going to be totally screwed up jet lagged wise. And I was breaking it down for her, even visually. When we get there, we're going to drop our bags at the hotel. We're going to do a quick shower, but we're not going to go to sleep because of jet lag. We're going to head right out to the beach. And I know you're going to feel tired, but I'm trying to paint the picture in as much detail as I can for her so that when we get there, she's not all stressed out, tired, wants to crash on the bed, but she's mentally prepared for what's going to happen. And then of course, it was an amazing trip. And we'll save that for another podcast. But today's episode is all about painting the picture. And I find that from the earliest days, when we first had the idea for Sactionals, we'd already had this beanbag, love sack, oversized, not beanbag, foam bag company going. But we had come up with this idea to shrink a couch down like we shrink the sacks down. And we weren't able to prototype the products in the way we needed to because we didn't have furniture manufacturing equipment. But rather than just take drawings only to these furniture factories who were going to prototype for us, we did the best we could to make them and help them visualize exactly what we're trying to achieve. My point is, this episode, this Shawnism is all about painting the picture. Fast forward all the way to today, 20 years later. And as we have whole new strategic shifts at Lovesac, whole new visions for all kinds of really cool stuff coming, I have found it the most productive mechanism. Sometimes I'll pay big money to have things rendered, drawn, 3D, 3 dimensionally, digitally rendered, so that I can show my teams what it's going to become. And then, by the way, the teams go at it and the final product will be very different. And you could say, I threw away thousands of dollars making these renderings, but it's because I've found it the most successful strategy to paint the picture. And I'm constantly painting the picture with my words, with my descriptions, with actual visualizations. I'm going to talk about this topic, paint the picture, with one of the most successful people on the planet again. When it comes to painting the picture, we'll talk about this idea of showing, not just telling, the power of imagery, how being consumed by your own big idea can sometimes stop us because we can't connect the dots from where we are to how we're going to get there, or have the patience to navigate that process and hang on to that big picture. We can't let it overwhelm us. We can't let it consume us. We have to be able to work back to where we are today, right? How great entrepreneurs are never deterred by competition. How if your dream is big enough, then the tent can be wide enough to include plenty of people in it, because there will be a lot of credit to be given. And if you hog it all, you're robbing yourself of the greatest opportunity of sharing it with others and being honest, right? Because doing big things requires many, and credit is infinitely divisible. We can be generous with giving credit to others. Persistence is key, of course, in business, but in life, in parenting, and anything else. And who better to break it down with than a top CEO, a top founder, an executive from Facebook, PayPal, one of the most brilliant people I've ever had on this podcast. You're going to love this episode. Check it out. Today's guest is one of those people who makes you rethink what's possible in a single career. It's kind of unbelievable. She helped build Facebook Marketplace from scratch, led teams at PayPal and eBay, and then said, why not? And became the president and CEO of Ancestry, helping millions of people discover who they are and where they came from. She's a Silicon Valley heavyweight, best-selling author, the founder of Women in Product, and somehow one of the most grounded, real leaders you'll ever hear from. Please welcome the brilliant, bold, and deeply insightful Deb Liu.
Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. It's great to be with you. I'm so excited to have this conversation. And without even thinking too hard, Deb, when you heard our Shawnism of the day, paint the picture, what's the first thing that came to mind for you?
Well, it's funny. I actually read this book. I had found this book at a sublet I had for summer, and it's called The Language of Love. And it was so instrumental for me. So it was written by Gary Smalley and John Trent. They're two Christian authors. And they talked about how when you're in a relationship, you should use word pictures. So don't just say, I'm hurt, but actually show people. Don't tell. And I use that book. I mean, I've been looking for a copy of this, by the way. I need to get another copy of this because I remember how instrumental it was and how I communicated, which is when you tell people something, they don't remember. But when you use a word picture, when you actually can paint a picture of what that is. And so I recently started a startup, and one of our philosophies is show, don't tell. If you can show somebody something, they can remember it. If you tell somebody, they forget. And I have a few quotes that I stored in my mind of something like this, where I remember the CTO of PayPal we were working with was talking about how we had to rewrite a big part of the back end. And everyone just said, well, why are we stopping feature work to do this thing? And finally, he said something which stuck with a lot of us, and we still quote him to this day. Our code is so intertwined that when you turn the light on in building 10, the toilet flushes in building 14. And so if you think about, he could describe how difficult it is. He could talk about how intertwined the code is, or he could actually just say that. And when he said that, suddenly everybody's like, oh, yeah, actually, this is happening. And so, again, I think sometimes we think when we tell somebody they remember, but it's the word picture, it's the image in their mind that sticks with them. And so I have used this philosophy throughout my career, no matter what I'm doing, which is really not telling people we should build Facebook Marketplace, but describing a vibrant community where people are trading with their neighbors, where we our philosophy was connecting people through commerce. That this is a local place where people could meet their neighbors. And suddenly it took off. Like we got support and we were able to get funding to actually build it. But again, it was really telling the story by showing what's possible.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to unpack and all of that. Thank you for throwing all that out there. And you so artfully strung together all these big experiences from your life. I can tell you, as just an observer, I'm not a tech person, but I remember using PayPal back in the day when I feel like you'd turn on the light in building 10 and the toilet would flush in building 14. And I was always perplexed, like, because it seemed like, this big established mechanism that was all over the internet. And it just seemed so mysteriously glitchy to me. And so perhaps I was experiencing some of that.
Yeah. And our customers could feel it too. And, but it was hard to explain to people. At one point, they actually took and printed out the lines of code that they were simplifying and actually rolled it out and had it rolled out from the building, the lobby of the building, so you could see, and then what they replaced it with. And again, super memorable moment that was a touch point that people pointed to. They didn't say, hey, we reduced the number of lines of code from X to Y. They actually showed, printed out that roll of code, and suddenly you could see physically, you could feel how much the code simplification mattered. And then you could see what the impact was on the customer.
Yeah, powerful. In fact, it reminds me, for anyone listening, there's a very powerful book that talks specifically about this tactic in great depth called Switch. I don't know if you ever read it. It's one of my, I'd put it on my top 20 at least books that I've read, and it talks about how to change people's minds. And the idea that it uses examples like the one you just articulated from PayPal, where it's like, don't just talk about, the code goes on for days and it really needs to be simplified. Find a way to make that visceral. And so in your case, they printed it out, rolled it out the length of the lobby, comparing that, I guess, to the new version that was probably a fraction of it. And that made it, and look how it stuck with you. Your example of, again, turning on the light in building 10, the toilet flushes in building 14. Show, don't tell. So now I'm curious, now that you are in a startup role, so you've gone from these big executions, obviously PayPal has continued to not just exist, but proliferate all of these great founders, talent like yourself coming out of it, being involved with Facebook Marketplace. I mean, we could go deep there, but here you are in a startup now. Tell us about your startup and tell us how Show Don't Tell is working for you.
Yeah, I mean, so our startup is really focused on bringing AI to companies who have IT teams but not engineers. We feel like there's kind of this, there's these companies who are tech companies, they're leaning into AI. And then, there's a lot of fast software built with AI for kind of smaller companies. And then the very large enterprises can hire the, big consulting firms to do a big project for them. And there's a large group of companies, 50 million in revenues to maybe $1 billion, where, AI hasn't touched. These are folks in, very boring industries, as they say, where it's like manufacturing or, accounting firms or law firms, real estate. You look at, private equity investors, and, they have IT tools, but they don't have AI that are really helping them with workflows. And so rather than, a typical, AI strategy engagement is like you go in, you interview a bunch of people, you write a deck. And we said, look, let's turn it on its head. Within 2 weeks, we do 3 meetings. And within 3 meetings, we can show you a prototype of what AI could do for your company. That's awesome. So it actually turns this entire model where we actually show you the prototype before you sign with us. We've already built it. And you can see what's possible. And we do that because of a proprietary technology that we have to actually turn our intake conversations into software. And we pick the most boring, most difficult workflows, the ones that people hate the most. So we help people. There's one company we work with where they said their invoicing system is run through email. And there's a lot of mistakes because individuals have to go into the email, pick it apart, then like manually create, like reimbursements and things like that. That's where AI is brilliant. You don't need, a dozen procurement experts to actually go in and fill. You want them to focus on higher value things. And that's where AI really shines. And so our philosophy is show, don't tell is like when people can actually see and feel what the next chapter looks like, then they're on board. If you just describe, hey, if you do this project in a year, maybe this will happen, they viscerally can't see. And I think AI has made it possible for us to really do that showing in such an incredible way. And so each of our clients really gets the first version of their project before we've even engaged, because they're able to see, visually see and use the tools and actually see what's possible.
That is awesome. What's the name of the firm?
The firm is Ember. It's ember.new. And we just started it. We're just finishing our fundraise, and we're really excited to bring it to market.
That's great. We might have to subject Lovesac to your services. It sounds amazing.
We'd love to have you as part of the process. I mean, the companies, especially over 10, 20 years old, that's where you find a lot of these manual processes that, like it makes sense when you're growing really quickly to build human processes. But what we do is we look for routinized, high frequency and high human capital areas. And then we automate as much of it as possible so that you can actually spend those human resources on redeploying towards revenue generating activities. And so it's been really fun just seeing these different industries and what you can do.
Yeah. So it sounds like show, don't tell. You've made a part of your sales process, your operating process at Ember. And that's really powerful. Well, look, that's what, that's what's meant by this idea of, paint the picture. I've found it's kind of amazing leading an organization of, I think, almost any size. It could be you and a friend. It could be a startup in your case as you're getting going, raising funding in the early days. In the case of Lovesac, I sometimes talk about Lovesac like a 27-year-old startup. We are long into this business, but we still have preferred to kind of keep a chip on our shoulder, remain scrappy, try not to be too corporate about many things. But I find that no matter how big we get, how corporate we get, how much process is built, one of my roles in particular is to paint the picture over and over again. And it can be on both the biggest strategic kind of stuff, like where we're going, obviously, and what comes next, which is ground that is rife for painting the picture, for again, getting it out of words. And I go so far as to either myself or pay money to generate actual visuals, whether we're talking about like a new store concept, a whole new brand concept, a product, whatever. I just find visuals to be incredibly powerful, but not always easy to generate. Now they're becoming a lot easier with AI.
Yes.
Right. As you, I'm sure, can shed light on, but, and I think that that's very powerful and not to be trifled with, because I think one of the easy observations with AI at the moment is that, oh, look, we can make funny videos, or, oh, look, we can make really tricky videos, seeing impersonating celebrities, doing goofy things with animals, like who knows what, right? And they're fed to us on social media, in reels and all other realms. But to use the same power to generate imagery, whether it's moving imagery, whether it's still imagery, to help convey what it is you're trying to communicate, should be a skill that is harnessed by anyone serious in any leadership position, in my point of view, because words are easy and we traffic in words. It's a natural human advent. But the ability now that's been given us by AI to generate imagery to go along with our words, even if it's clumsy, is incredibly powerful, and perhaps one of the most powerful, at least early ways that I think AI can impact, again, anyone in any leadership capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about the power of political cartoon. You know, in one frame, you can create humor, but also criticism. You can point out hypocrisy, and so I do think the power of imagery is so we see it all over, and yet so often a lot of leaders don't use that. They don't leverage. When you're talking about store concepts, imagine someone walking through as opposed to you describing it. They feel like they're walking through. Imagine that they're there, feeling and touching what a customer is going to feel. That's so much more powerful, and it enforces culture. You think about, like, for example, the imagery of the day one concept that Jeff Bezos talks about at Amazon, right? You can imagine day one. What does that look like when he described one-way versus two-way doors? That is like a shorthand, and I think it's both using words to describe this, but then actually visualizing it, showing your customer, showing your team what it feels like. And I think that is one of the things that we underutilize, is actually communicating through pictures and word pictures, that people have a better understanding when they can actually feel the viscerally what it is that hits them. And I think that we a lot of executives are like, well, if we just write it, they will come. But actually, it's one of the things that's really important is repetition is so important, and helping people see it from different perspectives in the same way.
Yeah. And I read something somewhere. You do something with imagery, with comment. That's the wrong.
I have a strip called Mommy School.
Yeah.
That I drew with my kids. So I started it when my kids would just say really silly things that I would post on Facebook. It turned into a comic strip. Just a way of memorializing the experiences we had with our kids when they were young, and now they're teenagers, so they still love the comic strip, but they're like, we look like we're 6 and 8, and so it was just a great way for us to bond as a family, and conveying the out of the mouth of babes is what I call it, the silly things that the kids say.
Yeah, that's cool. In fact, it's funny you mentioned that. Just this morning, something funny was said, and I keep, like a lot of parents probably do, I have like a kid quotes little note on my phone that actually translates to this thing on my wall. It's hanging here in my office right across from me right now, with all the just the goofy things they said. But it sounds like you've turned that into a comic strip, and I think that's, there you have it again. Both from me and you, in the sense that those little quotes can live on my phone and maybe someday get unpacked. I've turned it into a visual on the wall, where it's actually, they're quotes on a canvas that we write with like a permanent marker. And they're just, then it becomes something different, and in fact, there's little traces of where they've written on it and things like that. You've turned it into a comic strip. And I just think it's a good example for anyone listening of, take these things that are abstract, or these ideas you have, and any, I think, method you can imagine to turn them into real artifacts. In your case, a comic strip, went beyond, just sharing, hey, my kid said something funny today, words on Facebook, and turn it into a meme, turn it into a canvas on the wall, turn it into, something physical. I think that thing, that idea, that impression can have a much, bigger and lasting impact in the world or in your life. In this case, maybe to bring a little bit of joy, to retain some memory, to celebrate with others. And it's a good example of this exact topic, right? Paint the pictures. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool. Well, so let's rewind for a second. I want to go back to it sounds like from, again, my learning about you, you had this notion of Facebook Marketplace, which is a big deal. I think that probably everyone listening has used or had to use Facebook Marketplace to acquire something. I know in my case, I'm a big dirt bike guy, and there are many parts and pieces and things that's the only outlet. That's the only place where you can find certain things or certain deals. And so, tell us about that experience.
Well, it's funny. I joked that it was it seems like an overnight success, but I actually pitched it. So I interviewed in 2009 for Facebook, and I actually interviewed with Sheryl Sandberg, and I pitched her Facebook Marketplace. And I never knew her side of the story, like what she thought when I pitched her building this marketplace. Later, she actually wrote the foreword to my book, and she said, "I thought you weren't serious about the job we wanted to hire you for because you were selling me this other thing, but we hired you anyways." And went on to do that job. I led payments and games. I ended up building out a lot of the billing system, and then eventually worked on Facebook platform. And every single time, every year, I was like, "We should build Facebook Marketplace." And I would describe, this is community commerce. This is all the things we can do. And I just remember like so many people would say, "Well, why would anyone want to buy anything on Facebook?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And so I worked on all these different projects. Eventually, I built the first direct response ads product. I built the ad network. I, took over a platform, which was like Facebook login and all these other sharing products. And finally, I got a chance to build Facebook Marketplace. And people just didn't, a lot of people didn't understand, but, I tell the story because I was one of the very few moms at the company who worked in product. In fact, I was the only mom who worked in product. There were 6 of us. I was the only one. I had 3 kids. I joked that all the women had half a kid, but I had to take care of them when I got home. And then the rest of the team, more than 90% were male PM. But I could see something that other people couldn't see, which was all of these mom groups formed to buy and sell from each other. Because when you have kids, your kids are constantly outgrowing things. You constantly need things, but they only used it for 2 years. I remember describing how I bought a couple of scooters and then I sold it back. So it was basically renting, and I didn't have to store it. And I sold it back to another family down the street, and how I got my kids' bikes, and I bought a used refrigerator. And, it was really showing, not telling. Like when I could describe how I used the product as a mom, as a community member, that was when it really took off, when I got support within the company to start building it. Mark gave us support to do it eventually. And we joked that it was a 4-year overnight success. The launch was not successful. It took us a long time to get there, but now over 1 billion people use the product, and I'm really proud of it. And so even to this day, I still use it. I recently bought something, I sold something, and it's still a big part of my life.
That's amazing. And there are so many great lessons that we can extrapolate from that. Immediately, and this is one that comes up a lot for anyone listening, I apologize, but these are foundational lessons. The final little Shawnism in my book, Let Me Save You 25 Years, is maintain your top ambition with infinite patience. And as I hear you articulate this hankering you had to build Facebook Marketplace, you first had to go get hired, and that was for a job that was not directly relevant. And to your point, you almost maybe missed that opportunity, as it turns out. And life works that way, but you got it. And they hired you, right, to do payments because that was your background and expertise. And then you probably had to be very patient, probably infinitely patient. You may have never seen yet, when you were living it in real time, I'm guessing, the window of opportunity where you'd get the chance to somehow slide into this big idea you had. And that is something that I just have to call out for people, because we can be consumed by our big idea and distracted to the point where we can't do our job, or we can't feed our family, or we can't get the job because we can't connect the dots from A to Z without going through, B, C, D, on down the alphabet. That can be very difficult for people to do. So, and have the patience to do so, which you clearly just demonstrated in the way you described the years it took for you to do these different jobs at Facebook that might lead you back. And did you lose hope? Like, describe for people how you did that, how you hung on to this hankering
Yeah.
and had to do these other jobs to kind of navigate your way there in a non-linear path, perhaps.
Well, during those 6 years, I worked on a lot of really incredible products. And so was able to build from, 0 to 1 and then 1 to 10, multiple products that were billion-dollar businesses. And so I had a really satisfying career, but inside I was like, this is the product I think the world needs. I can see this so tangibly. So every hackathon, every product pitch, I would just like keep working at it. And every manager I had, every VP I reported to was like, we're going to do this someday. And they're all like, yes, but do this next job. I even considered leaving to go work on it. But finally, one of my managers, Mike Vernal, he said, he thought I had a list of, future projects. And he's like, oh, that commerce one. Maybe we should pitch that one next. And I was like, are you serious? It's been 7 years. And so at that point, it had almost 6 years. And so we pitched it and we got funding for it. And, it started out slow. It took us a year to really build out the product the way we wanted. And then even then it didn't take off. It took almost 4 years for it to really, really take off. And, but I knew that there was a there. And because I could see it, I had bought and sold so many things on Facebook. And even when other people don't see it, if you have that vision, but it meant that I had to do an amazing job at my day job. Whatever my job was, I had to show that I could build the next thing by doing a great job where I am. And so I always tell people, fall in love with the problem that you have today and keep your eye on the longer thing that you want to build, because it might not just be the right time. And so the right time came along and we built it. It took us a while to get it to take off, but now, it's been really incredible to see what's come.
I mean, it's massive. And I mean, it really is an institution in the world that will probably be around for 100 years. And to your point, be used by a billion people. And I just can't emphasize enough to anyone listening how many different principles must be, simultaneously maintained in order to achieve something like that. Another one that comes to mind that we talk about on this show, keep one hand on the now and one hand on the next. And you did that throughout this 7 year, and then a year to build it and another 4 years to try and get it to traction. And most people get so frustrated back in year 1 or 2 or 3 of that 7-year process that they either force something too soon because they just got to have it. Or they self-immolate trying to demand it, before it's time. And that is so tricky. It is one of the trickiest aspects of being an entrepreneur, in my opinion, because as an entrepreneur, and you're obviously a serial entrepreneur, you were an intrapreneur for a lot of years. You've been a CEO of a big organization, Ancestry, global reach, and now, a founder of a startup. It requires this crazy combination of ambition. You're a person of ambition, obviously, and patience. And those are so hard for people to reconcile. And so, for anyone listening, I just have to call out. And I love your story because it's such a good example of and that's the trick. Because I think people of ambition have a hard time with patience because it sounds unambitious. It feels unambitious, like I'm just working my job. But to your point, you said it. You had to show that you could do your day job well, so that you would have the opportunity someday to hopefully build this product that you somehow maintained faith in all the way through, even after, whether it's actual rejection or even just being put off for many, many years. By the way, in that process, were you ever worried that maybe your idea would get stolen by, or jumped on by others? Like, how did you feel about that? Because people worry about that, of course, too. And here you were presenting it over and over again. Tell us about that.
Well, in my mind, I wanted to see the product in the world more than I wanted to own it. So it's a little bit different when you're an entrepreneur because, I would love somebody in the company to do it. Anybody. Eventually the Instagram team had come over and they were interested in Instagram shopping. And we actually funded headcounts when we started Marketplace. We funded some headcount to test Instagram shopping because we wanted to see it in the world, like that you would be able to tag products. And I worked with that team to see it come to life. And so, a lot of times if your dream is big enough, you can include more people in it. It's a big tent. Now, obviously, as an entrepreneur, it's a competitive situation, but the other thing I see is great founders actually are undeterred when there's competition, because I was talking to one entrepreneur, incredible guy. He just said, that's just validation that I'm on the right track. And I thought that was really incredible is to, have that understanding that if no one's ever done it before, there's usually a reason.
Yeah.
And if somebody else is doing it, can you out execute them? And so how do you reframe the problem? And so I really think a lot about that, which is, what is the good you want to see in the world? And what part do you want to play in that? And those two things are not necessarily related, because you can see a product in the world because of something you want to see, but you don't necessarily have to be a part of it. Or you could do it as an advisor or some other capacity. And so, if you have a dream, make sure you understand what role you want to play in that dream as well.
Yeah. I mean, these are huge drops of wisdom for anybody listening. I just have to repeat that, right? If your dream is big enough, you can include more people in it. Also, I love what you said about this notion. You said, I wanted to see it in the world more than I wanted to necessarily own it. And that intention is something that I believe is the unlock to doing big things in this life.
Mm.
Even though I think any of us as humans want to try to protect the things that, we generate. I think it's natural to feel like, hey, this is my idea or this is my baby, whatever. I think that's a natural feeling that can come along. But if you can overcome that to some degree, and in the spirit of like goodness, in the spirit of truth and beauty and goodness, try to get things to happen in the world just for the sake of those good intentions, I think it's far more likely that you will end up being able to play a role in it. Hopefully, in your case, play maybe even the role in it. But look, it's something like this, to your point. It sounds like Facebook Marketplace was your baby, but you and I both know there were hundreds of people involved in it. And perhaps maybe even along the way, other people that took credit, got credit, were given credit. I don't know. I don't know the story, but
that's one thing my manager always told me, which is credit is infinitely divisible. And so really being generous with all the people who help you along the way. That is so often we read these stories of successful people and we write everyone else out of the story. It's as if they did everything alone. No, but you read these books. It's like, I did this all by myself. It's a hero's journey, but it's a solo journey. And yet none of that is true. If you've ever met a successful person and they don't credit the people around them, they've written everybody else out. And I think that's a tragedy, because so many people, are helping each person succeed. And so I write, one of the chapters of my book is building allies. You can't succeed alone. You have mentors, you have sponsors, you have your team, you have your circle, you have these people who are carrying you along the way. And I feel like if you're not celebrating and, those people, then you're really, you're basically telling the story by deleting every character. And your book is so much less rich without those folks there.
Absolutely. Your book is less rich. Your life is less rich. And look, in the end, something as penetrating and as useful as Facebook Marketplace exists because you maintained that ambition. You were willing to give away the credit necessarily. You were willing to share it with others. You were willing to put it at risk. You're willing to pitch it and pitch it and pitch it again. Someone else could have picked up that ball and ran with it and carved you out. But that's not the way the universe unfolded. And I just think you're a great evidence to people of when you're willing to be generous with your thinking. You're willing to be generous with your vision. You're willing to be generous. And then you're willing to be patient. And again, as a person of ambition, that can be very difficult. And that's a lesson that I just cannot be vocal enough about, because I'm living it myself. Like my purpose and vision for Lovesack extends way beyond selling a bunch of giant bean bags or even couches and getting super rich from it. Like it's in fact to a fault, and it can be a problem, and in ways that I won't go into. But I'm just not driven by the money of it. And it's not to say, look, I don't live frugally. I have a fun life. I do all kinds of, anyone who knows me. But it's just not. I'm not motivated to chase the big money. I'm motivated to get this thing into the world. And what Lovesack can become and represent. Again, our ticker on Wall Street is LOVE, love. The culture, we're a company of people. I love the idea of what AI can do in the world. At the same time, like I'm intentionally building certain aspects of my business to be people centric because I believe in it. Now, it's not to say that I don't believe in automation. We're actually automating a lot of our manufacturing. We're bringing it back to the United States using automation and AI as well. Because frankly, when I watch people in these factories overseas, I don't like it. Like I love the fact that we've elevated some of these countries out of poverty. But these are jobs that, if by choice, I would rather employ the same people selling these really cool couches in air-conditioned shopping malls in Vietnam, for instance, than employing them sanding down the little feet on Sactionals. Like it's not a job that, is fantastic work. So I'm actually really excited to automate certain aspects of my business. But as I just described, I actually want other aspects of my business that I won't go into to be people-centric, because I believe in building a culture that gets to employ thousands of people as we do today. And I think it's fantastic. My point being, I have a vision for Lovesack that's quite expansive. It would probably surprise a lot of people. And in fact, it would probably make a lot of investors and other people roll their eyes. Our stated mission is to build the most loved brand in the world. And so I'm talking Nike, Apple kind of ambitions for this dumb beanbag company I started as a college student. But I'm not joking around. And by the way, I think we can do it, because as you're going to discover, Deb, when you buy your Sactionals, you're going to wake up like 8 years down the road and be like, holy crap, he wasn't kidding. Like these things could outlive me. I'm sitting on a Sactionals piece right now that's 18 years old. It's mixed with brand new pieces. It's wearing its 10th set of covers. This is a reversible cover. I got to change it with the seasons. And it's because we've designed it to be that way. And I think that is the bones of a brand that could become the most loved brand, because we're not just trying to get you to buy the same iPhone a year from now so that we can make $1 billion raping the earth for all of its resources and making more iPhones. That's not a brand that can ultimately be loved. Anyway, I could go on and on about this. What's my point? It's required my entire adult life. It's sucked in 3 decades almost and hasn't turned me into a billionaire. And I don't really care, because I'm actually still on the path where I think this is possible. It's going to take another couple decades probably. But that's my message to anybody listening. And I love your example, Deb, because you had to exercise the patience and maintain the ambition and show, not tell along the way, in order to finally, and not just achieve what you did with Facebook Marketplace as an example, but put yourself in a position where now you get to create something new and grand and something that you maybe couldn't have even necessarily have envisioned 2 decades before.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I just love your vision of building something that's lasting. I feel like the ephemerality, it's like this fast fashion, everything is like disposable.
Yeah.
Part of the mission of Facebook Marketplace was, basically everybody has all of these things and we don't need more stuff. If we just took out all the things that we didn't need and actually shared it with the community.
Love it.
And, there was just like less waste in the world.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what we did was like, how do we actually get people to recycle the things that they don't need? The extra, for example, I will sell after I get my sectional. I'm going to sell my couches on Facebook Marketplace. I've already sold actually 3 couches on Facebook Marketplace, a futon and a couch, and sold it to a startup that wanted a couch, but that couch was like super cheap. It was like not in great shape. I tried to give it away, couldn't give it away. I put it for like $40 and someone came and took it. So, but I want something that's lasting. But I also, one of the things I think about is like, what are you contributing to the world? And I love your vision of something that's really lasting, where, it's not like it's a throwaway culture that we have where everybody just buys clothes and tosses it. I just hate that. And so I'm like, if we could just have more endurance, then people can pass it on. You can pass it on to your community. You can share it with other people.
I mean, thank you. That is exactly the backbone of our brand, which again is surprising to people that, only know our story. We started with making big bean bags. Now we make couches. On the surface, yeah, we're a couch company, but what you just described drives us. And we just launched Loved by Lovesac, where people can buy now returned product. Eventually we'll take trade-ins. Eventually we'll allow people to be trading their covers. And we have to talk offline, but it makes me wonder if there's a collab with Facebook Marketplace, because that's where we got the idea. There's a Facebook group on Facebook. It's over 100,000 members of Sactionals owners that already trade amongst themselves.
I'm actually in one of those groups because I was debating, should I get a new piece? But I wanted to see also what it looks like when someone sells it. What is the shape of it? And so I actually joined one of these buy, sell, trade, Lovesac groups.
That's it. That's the one. And we observe that, and we love seeing it, even with even whatever criticisms are, because we learn so much from that, and we want to be better. We want to make better product always, but we also want to make a program where people can do that even more slickly than what's possible now, because these are big items and shipping is a pain and the logistics are a pain. Even though ours are better than most, like ours break down into these pieces, they can be shipped. But as you can imagine, and now of course, Facebook is local and hyper local, and so anyway, do me a favor. We'll talk offline about AI.
And you can talk to the people that run Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah. I think we need to, because look, our intention at the end of the day isn't just to squeeze an extra dollar out of this transaction. Our intention is to try to provide a 360-degree experience where, again, people like you can 2 years, 4 years, 12 years down the road, be doing it more efficiently. And if they want to do it because they want to save the earth, great. If they want to do it because they want to save a buck, great. And then people, we're a public company, just imagine. So then investors ask, well, then how are you going to make money? Look, it's my point of view that Apple should have already solved traffic or done something else, but we just keep throwing money at them for the same device every other year. Lovesac will get into other realms. Lovesac will invent other products. We'll use our resource and our profits to solve other problems besides just couches and the trade-in process. And we'll sell more couches. But that's our vision. That's our point of view. And I only am on, I'm sorry to talk my book, but I'm only doing it so those listening can connect those dots, that whatever you're doing right now, even if you're just making a big bean bag because people liked it, that was me in college. And I started making more and I was just trying to survive. I had no vision of, a 360-degree seamless transactional trade in, trade up marketplace for couches and other things coming. But that's what it can evolve to if you maintain top ambition and the patience it takes. And that's the problem is that the world is so full of, not so full, but there are enough true overnight successes. Someone is at 1 billion, holy crap, 2 years in, or, Hailey Bieber launched a skincare line, or who knows what. And there will be endless articles written about those because they are truly remarkable and strange. But the vast majority of great things on the earth, like what you've invented and what you're even doing now, I'm sure, can only come with a lot of patience.
Well, I think we look at the top 1% or top 0.1%. It's like, it's kind of like you play basketball in high school and you think you're going to go to the NBA. But actually, learning any skill is just a skill, and it takes a long time to be great at something, and not everybody makes it. And I think, but in business and in building your career and in building your companies, it's really the people who persist. Even podcasts, they said something like 80% of podcasts don't have more than 10 episodes. People just give up. But, you look at the ones who have millions of listeners, but the first part is getting past 10 episodes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm living that myself, and this is living proof of that.
Yeah. And so it's waking up and doing it every day. And it's boring sometimes, it's frustrating sometimes, it's emotional sometimes. But it's the people who persist, who fight through, who, the 7th year you're pitching the same idea. Someday it will happen. But really kind of, I ask people, like, are you moving the ball a little bit every day? Sometimes you get the help, you move it all the way down the line. And sometimes, you just move it inches, and that's okay. But, if you really have a vision for something, really continue to push on it.
That's brilliant. Wow. Well, look, in the spirit of this podcast and everything Let Me Save You 25 Years stands for, if you had if I challenge you to say, you've done a lot of things right. You've built this amazing career. Your work at Ancestry is amazing. If you could go back and give yourself advice at the time when it was more formative for you, what advice do you have out there for anyone listening, a way to save them a chunk off their own 25-year journey?
So the learning mindset is absolutely the one thing I think all young people coming out, if you are learning and every day you're moving forward, you're going to be better than the expert someday. It's going to take time, but I see this happen a lot. Someone comes into the company and it's like they're the expert, but someone who's learning is going to continue to build skills, and over time, really, taking feedback, being willing to learn, being willing to listen to your mentors, being willing to make mistakes. I think so often we just say, well, I do X, but stretch yourself. Push yourself to try other things, like take on new roles. I remember when my head of design said to me, I want to learn strategy. And I was like, you're an amazing designer, but let's teach you how to do strategy, something he had never done before. But he raised his hand. It wasn't choppy the first couple of times we did it. Absolutely. But by the 3rd and 4th time, he was able to contribute so much to the development of our long-term strategy for marketplace. And so it is so important to raise your hand and try things that might suck at the beginning. But it's kind of like when you first start working out, it hurts, but that's just you building muscle for the next time, until it becomes second nature. But continuously forcing yourself to build muscle, different muscles that you don't have, will get you stronger in the long term. And I've seen that happen so much in people's careers. And it's those who kind of sit back and say, well, I'm doing a good job up here. And that's okay. But if you want to be exceptional, it's really pushing yourself to always be learning.
Fantastic advice. Perfect. Thank you. Well, look, you can follow Deb, as I do, at Deb Liu. That's DEBLIU _ on Twitter and Instagram. You can subscribe to her Substack, which has she has 50,000 subscribers. So she's putting out great content on Substack. Find her there, debliu.substack.com. Thank you so much to the manufacturer of Facebook Marketplace, the A+ asset at Ancestry, the fearless founder of Women in Product, and now her own firm, Ember. It's amazing, Ms. Deb Liu.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes. And remember this, for anyone listening, if people can't see what you see, they'll never be able to build what you're building. So paint the picture, say it again, show it again, find a way to make it visceral, and don't assume that clarity ever happens just by accident. It just might save you a chunk off your own 25-year journey.
Once a year to take my friends away. It should not be the budget for your bike across America.
TikTok has become an aggregator for some of the dumbest human actions.
When I won that million, I was 2 million in debt, barely hanging on.